What's going on? Hey, Dan, how's it going?
All good.
All
Ready to
right,
jump
cool.
into things. Yep.
Yeah, we're live again. Hey, it's Friday. If you're joining us, this is a live cast. We're doing every Friday at 11:30 or 11. We're trying to get this sequence down, aren't we, Dan? We're going to be providing a lot of content for you guys. So if you're joining us for the first time, we go live every Tuesday and Friday. Again, Tuesdays and Fridays around 11 a.m. So I'm excited to have it. I'm on the move, Dan. So I'll be kind of muting my mic and talking in and out. But today we have some good content for people. We're going to be going over. I'm just going to dive into it. We're going to be going over one of my favorite topics when it comes to the acceleration plan. I don't know about you. This is a fun topic. Meeting pulsing. It's my
hmm
favorite.
hmm
Kick us off a little bit. Give us a little background on. Let's start with this because everybody has meetings. We've all, if you haven't read the book, everybody knows the book, Death by Meetings, or the 1 Minute Meeting. That was Blanchard, I think, that wrote that one. Um, we all have experienced meetings. Dan, what's your experience? Let's start from when you were in your other careers. How were meetings back then, and then we'll get into the secret sauce of the meeting that we had for him.
I think a lot of us probably share a story similar to this one where you're jumping into meetings, meeting after meeting. They might be ran by one person, or every time you show up to a meeting, you don't know who's running it. And maybe they surprise attack you and throw it to you to run. There's maybe some miscommunication on what's being talked about in the meeting or the agenda that you've got to go over. So I would say that's an experience that I had, and maybe a lot of us experience that same type of meeting environment. And whether those are productive or not sometimes comes down to the team and the team's ability to execute on just their individual work that they've been assigned, and not necessarily that the meeting created a collective effort. So if that kind of hits what your question was, I
Yeah.
do think that that's a typical experience that people have, is chaotic meetings and frequent meetings, and they're not sure if they're valuable or not.
Yeah, and I think you know, the meetings can be effective. We all have meetings of some sort. It could be in a some sort of community, whatever you're doing. Everybody's been in a meeting that doesn't go well, or that's not organized. Or I remember in meetings, I had a leader that they ended up being complaining sessions instead of productive sessions, and it was really stressful. Every week, I remember the meeting was coming up, and I would dread it. I didn't like the weekly meeting with my team because I knew one thing that we get complaints a lot of times when we work with leaders is a lot of them say when we do meetings, we have no clue what was discussed or talked about. So it was really interesting that way. So let's kind of dive in. Um, I'd like to take it down this direction in this conversation is how do we why is it so important to have effective meetings, Dan? Like that would be number one. Why would anybody want to listen to this? Why? Because if I was an executive and I feel I run the best meetings ever, and why would they even want to make their meetings better? Let's start there.
I mean, to boil it down, meetings are essential components to one, organizational management, and effective organizational management at that. And two, they're necessary for strategic planning. So if there's a leader who believes that their particular meeting is effective, um, the question that you would have is, does the leadership team and do those underneath the leadership team, are they filling the results of that effectiveness that's believed to be having, going on? And so meetings, as simple as that, without doubling up on the explanation, is you need meetings because you need effective organizational management, and you also need meetings for strategic planning.
And that's the big thing, is that strategic planning, because a lot of times we meet for the sake of meeting, and we've said that word a lot in so far meeting. And how do we take that whole idea and turn it upside down? That's what I want to get into. I don't want to delay it much longer, because I think what I want to get out of this, if they're going to be listening to this, is we're going to teach you here. And this is what our whole objective of going live on these 2 days is, to give you lots of value. And so I'm excited. So stay to the end, because we're going to teach you how to quarterly pulse. So we're going to start with weekly pulsing, and then we're going to go into the quarterly pulsing. So watch the video all the way to the end, because you'll miss out if you don't follow it all the way through. And if you feel you're effective, I'd love to hear some comments below how you're making your team's meetings effective. So let's start with the weekly pulsing. In the acceleration plan, how do we roll this out, Dan? Let's start there. I'm going to let you roll it out. If we were in a team and we were teaching them, how would we teach this concept?
Weekly meetings, I think, tackles the first part that we were talking about, that you need effective organizational management. So weekly meetings are a management tool of how you communicate and execute things. You've got regular communication that's happening because you're meeting weekly. You have regular alignment that's occurring. You've created agility in decision making, meaning that you can meet frequently enough that you're quick to make decisions or respond to situations that are both maybe obstacles or things that you want to take advantage of. You get a chance in a weekly meeting to monitor progress. Your team is out there doing things that the company needs to get done, but can you determine what the progress is on those particular things? If you have weekly meetings as well, you're coming together, especially the leadership team is coming together. You're finding some team cohesion. You're getting to touch base with each other. You're getting morale brought up as if you do it right, right? If you're doing a meeting that focuses on those 2 points, you also have a chance to just roll up your sleeves and problem solve things and be innovative. There's an open floor as well every week for the constant feedback and support that the team needs when they're out there getting the work that they need to get done.
Yeah, and I think what was the game changer when I started learning this, and I'm just going to go back, I wish I would have known as a leader early on. I remember my meetings years ago when I first came into leadership, and I'm going to tell you, they weren't the best. Now that I look back on it, because we would circle around issues, we would talk about them, but nobody would be assigned who was taking it on and who was responsible for that. And so I think young entrepreneurs have this issue, and coaches that try to coach, because there's a lot of noise out there. They try to coach a meeting that they've never ran, and running a lot of teams, Dan, over the years. When we ran, how was it when we first started as leaders? How was our meetings? Just in full transparency.
We were inconsistent. Yeah, we were inconsistent. We showed up
Yeah,
to talk about random topics. Finger pointing happened a lot because nobody knew that they were coming to a meeting to report on something, or the progress monitoring that we thought we could get from a meeting was a moving target. And so, yeah, they were chaotic and a lot of times not very productive at all.
yeah. How frustrating was our team at the time?
Oh,
It
no.
was
I just think that people didn't really look forward to a meeting. You know, the meeting
no.
would be called, hey, we're going to have a meeting at this time. And I don't think anybody was excited for that day
Yeah.
or that time to show up.
Yeah, and I think a lot of leaders have this issue. And if you're listening, I think for me, I didn't understand the process. Even though I'd been in so many organizations, I have an MBA, and they taught it in school. Well, let me back around. Let me back up a little bit. They did not teach that in school, how to run effective meetings. We learned theory, and a lot of these, C-suite. Hey, I went to MBA. Well, I have an MBA, and as Dave Ramsey says, it's just as worth as much as the paper on the wall. it talks about he talks about it's all about what you do to create more effectiveness. And I just we just well, for me, I can only speak. I just didn't know these concepts, and that's why I'm so excited to share them. And hopefully, if you're starting out as an entrepreneur, this by listening to this, you can jump right in and start running effective meetings. One piece I'll start in on the meeting, when we started learning how to do the meeting pulsing concept. The meeting pulsing was, I loved it when it started out on getting real, or just what was one personal, one business win for the week. Why do we start the meeting that way, Dan? What's the human connection there?
Yeah, bro, I mentioned it a little bit. It's team cohesion and morale. You're regularly interacting with these people to foster, a sense of team cohesion and belonging. And when you ask a question like that, that boosts morale. It creates a supportive environment where leaders can feel valued and heard. Everybody has their own thing going on in life, and so giving them the floor to share something that they feel is going on great personally humanizes everybody around and allows for support. Also, that one business best allows them to say what they feel like they're doing to contribute to the company.
Yeah, and I want to add to it. I think, as you said, I think it's morale, but it also makes me feel like you care about my personal life as well. Like
Mhm.
you want to hear something. And I think a good indicator too is when you come back the next week as the leader in charge and you say, "Hey Dan, you mentioned your son did this. How did it go in that last week?" That's huge because it ties into the human part of that individual. Because as leaders, we get stressed. We they end up feeling like they're a number, and so that human morale or that connection is really important. So that's huge. Now I know we explained a little bit. I want to kind of dive down in it because I'm more of a visual. So we have this first part: one personal, one business, and we're also trying to get the wins so we can all celebrate it as a team. And then the next part, what's that next step in the meeting? Let's go back and just break it down a little bit more.
Yeah, you can move on, what works best for you as far as
Mm,
structuring it. But what a lot of people find is effective after checking in is to move into something like what's the company news or
yeah,
what's something great happening as far as headlines of people or customers.
yeah,
And mostly those are positive things. You know, somebody from one apartment did X and it was really great, or a customer said Y and it was amazing to hear that. Sometimes that's a great moment too to bring up maybe concerns like a customer actually said that they were not very happy with something and let's talk about that. So it's good to move into something about company news or headlines so that you guys can talk about the good and maybe some areas to jump into.
yeah. And so that news is just there to really shout it and make sure the leadership, because then what the leaders can do too is if I say, "Hey, Johnny in Department X did this," then what better way of all the leaders when they see Johnny in the hall or somewhere in the facility and they say, "Hey, Johnny, we heard all the good stuff you did in the meeting today."
Mhm.
That's huge, isn't it? Is that huge for morale?
Yeah, you're definitely creating an environment where team members or leaders, and normally this is the leadership team, where the leadership team can cross, I guess you could say, cross pollinate into different departments and see somebody in a completely different department and be able to touch base with them and say, "I've heard you've done X, and that was really great."
Yep, and that's just huge. And that's the big thing. And to clarify, I like that you said that. This what we're teaching is Dan and I come in and with company acceleration, we work intimately and directly with the smallest version of your leadership. And we always say that term smallest. And why do we always say that, Dan? Smallest version.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't clean up the leadership team to be the main decision makers, those that are really doing the strategic work on the company, it can get a little bit watered down in meetings, and you're taking on too many areas or too many levels within the organization to where that leadership meeting, because we're focused right now, we're talking about the leadership meeting. that leadership meeting gets watered down. And so you want it to be as pure as possible in the sense of who is making decisions, who's the strategic movers in the company.
And let's take a pause on the structure of it, because this is huge. This point that you just made is, we've been in meetings where the supervisor in there is in the meeting and their direct report, haven't we?
Mhm.
And how effective is that? Because if my boss is in the meeting, am I going to be honest?
Yeah,
Am I going to
normally
speak up?
you're not going to make some movements in that
Yeah,
way.
because yeah. So if I was a supervisor, and we've seen businesses, because they're trying to, what Dan is saying is, here is structuring that leadership, getting it really tight, knowing that, hey, these are the leaders at the table, and none of their direct reports are in the room as well, because you can't have HR director plus an HR coordinator in the same room, because the coordinator reports to the HR director, right? You don't want to muddy those waters. You want to make sure you have your decision makers in the room, like Dan said, and why I'm kind of going a little deeper in this. I see a lot of leaders don't want to hurt feelings and bring everybody to the table, and so they're like, well, Johnny's been at the table for so long, I feel bad. Well, we use a term in setting up these meetings and structures. What is the best results or the outcome for the overall or the collective? Or in one of the books we read, what is the greater good, right? Of the whole organization. And sometimes that we have to work. Don't we have to work with leaders, Dan, and really tighten this down? This is one of the things we do on day one, right? We get in there for 8 hours and we tighten it down as facilitators, and help them really tighten this down into the leadership. So let's change direction. I just want to make sure I was harping on that a little bit, because it's you can see I get passionate, because the big thing is, that's what's so fun about it, is when we get in and start working with our team, we become part of that team for 3 years, and we're really just ranking and helping and asking the right questions and making the leaders think, because that's why you hire us. So we're there to ask the right questions. So we went in, we started meeting 5 minutes, how check in, one good, one positive for the week. Then we go in, what's the news for the company, and and that takes 5 minutes, and then we come down to the next part, which is, let's review company priorities, and usually the 90-day priorities. We go, hey, what are the 90-day priorities? And then we go through those 90-day priorities, and it's a really simple process. This is all housed, we teach you how to house this into a software, and that's the beauty about it. And that's a whole nother training or another video we'll do later, is that the software is going to track all those things. And when you go down through that, you'll just say this, it's this simple. Hey, Dan, it shows that you have a 90 here. If I was running, one person runs the meeting, by the way, we didn't clarify that. You can't have 5 people. And I want to drive that home. And the thing is, you can't have 2 people running a meeting. I've been in a room like that, and you can't have people talking over each other. So one of the tricks we do, and we should have started with this, is if I'm running the meeting, I'm going to say, okay, we're going to move to the left. So I'm going to start with the left, and we're going to move around and everybody. And I'll say, Dan, you're on my left. You have 190-day. Then Dan, what do you say? Is that on track or off track or done? And then you'll tell me and give me feedback on this. Is this section off track, right? Or on track?
Mhm.
Because it's 90 days. You don't. So let's talk about that a little bit, Dan, because when we get into these meetings, what's the tendency when we get into this section that people want to do?
Justify, over explain, give reasons why things are going, or boast
Yeah,
and say they're doing amazing, whatever it might be. But there could be a couple, it's just too long winded.
yeah,
And all you're trying to do here is find out if we're moving the needle or not.
yeah. Because there'll be another place where you can go deeper into that. Now, the cool thing about our software we use, and I'm just sharing it, what it does for us. If it's off track, once you click the off track, it goes to another section we'll get to, where it becomes a priority or an issue. We start talking about it. It goes into a bucket, and then and we're just there as your executive team. What we're trying to teach when we come in is we're just one big group of, say, if there's 5 of us, you have 5 brains to help you solve something in your department. We're not telling you what to do. You're just bringing that to us, and everybody's going to solve it together, right? We're going to help you if it's your thing.
Mm-hmm.
So 90 days, on track, off track. That section takes 5 minutes at the most. What'd you say, Dan? Depends on how big the group is, give or take. If you have
Yeah.
5 leaders, quick. Then you move on to what's next, Dan?
You're going to check in on quarterly or your key priorities.
Yep.
KPIs or.
Oh, did I mix those two? You can tell me. I think that goes before the.
I think the way that your leadership designs the agenda is up to you, but yeah, you're going to tackle KPIs and what your key performance indicators are. And there's a lot to unpack with each section of the agenda, but really these are the points that you're touching on. You're going to touch on the quarterly priorities. You're going to touch base on the key performance indicators, what's going on with progress in the company. And then from there, you'll double check how everybody did on to-dos that were assigned to them the last meeting a week ago, 7 days ago. Did they knock out the to-dos that they needed to do, or that they promised the leadership team that they were going to do? And you'll run through that particular section, and then you jump right into the bigger piece, which we refer to as analyzing and investigating and managing triggers. Triggers being whether they're positive or negative. What's triggering movement or things inside of the company? Is it a customer issue? Is it a marketing issue? Is there a trigger that's positive in whether or not you take on this particular opportunity or not? And if so, we get a chance to talk about all of those particular areas by analyzing them first, really understanding what's going on with that particular trigger, and then moving to investigating, what can be done about it, until finally we're able to hit that management section, which could be a decision. It could be a decision to track it further, meaning a plan or something that you're putting in front of a team member to hold and carry out for 7 days or so. A lot of things can happen during that process, but the meeting agenda is boiled down to that.
Yeah.
This area where you're discussing triggers and going through what we call the AIM process is the meat of the meeting. It's where you're spending all of your time to make movement and find what this team needs to do to help the company move forward towards their quarterly priorities that were set. So,
and we spend, like you said, and you gave a lot of information there. And if I just ask one follow-up question, because if I'm visual, I'm looking at that. So we're in that solving section. We spend most of the time in the AIM, which is, again, if you want to give me the acronym on that, AIM.
Yeah, to analyze what the trigger is that you want to talk about. And then once you really know what's going on with it, then you start to investigate how to resolve it or make movement with it.
Yeah.
And then once that's figured out, then you go to managing it. So you're analyzing, investigating, and managing.
So as a short bus leader, slowing this down and give me an example of this process. You gave one, but I want to just spend a little bit of time, because this is the secret sauce of the whole meeting. This is where you spend 60% of the time, because this meeting's only 90 minutes, by the way. We only do 90-minute meetings. We go through and help the leadership get rid of meaningless meetings that they're doing. 90% of the companies we come in are doing meetings they shouldn't be doing, because they're just being busy for the sake of being busy. And then we get this leadership meeting into it. And so in that meeting, AIM, we want to go through, and actually, let's do this, Dan. If they go down and comment below and leave their email, then we'll go over and we'll give them information on the AIM.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's easier, because it would probably take a little too long on this to explain it. Would you agree?
Yeah, for sure.
So just, if you're interested and you want to know that secret tool, that's a tool that we came up with, and it really helped our teams once we helped them understand that AIM tool. So again, I'm doing this on the fly. I want you to go, if you listen to this, if you will like the AIM tool, comment below. All you got to do is comment and leave your email, and we'll send it. So with the sake of time, we're going to jump to the next piece. This is the pulsing of the weekly meeting. Dan just went through it. We end it, and then we finalize the meeting. And then once a quarter, we're doing this weekly, because what the reason we call it meeting pulsing is you got to keep the pulse. You got to check in. And most 80%, 90% of the companies are checking in, but they do this whole, they have a meeting, it's ineffective, then they do, oh crap, we have another meeting coming up. And then their KPIs are not really accurate. They hurry and throw it together and make it look like they're doing stuff. What we've designed and what we go in and do as facilitators, we help accountability exist, which moves us to the quarterly. Let's just run through this with the last 5 minutes. How do we run an effective quarterly, Dan? Because it's amazing to me when businesses are not understanding quarterlies.
I mean, the hope behind a quarterly, or the objective, I guess I should say, behind a quarterly is that you're coming in for a strategic review and planning session. You're going to analyze performance, what happened. Maybe you talk a lot about resource allocation, long-term visioning, what's going on, how are we moving closer to our 1-year goal and our 3-year goals. There's a lot of celebrating of milestones that you guys knocked out of the way, or quarterly goals that you guys were able to accomplish. And so that quarterly meeting is a good moment for the leadership to come in and do those areas effectively. I would say also the way to think about a quarterly meeting is your strategic pit stop. Imagine that you're in a race and you're going down this track, and periodically you need to stop. You need to assess what your vehicle is doing. Maybe you need to refuel. Maybe you need to change strategies based on track conditions, right? All of a sudden the track changed, and so you've got to come in for a pit stop and figure out what's going on. And that's what you do every quarter. You're taking stock of your progress, and you're celebrating your wins, and you're learning from missteps. And then you're just recalibrating your strategies, and you're going to the next leg of your journey. And it's essential to pause and reflect and make those adjustments.
Yeah, and just to piggyback what I said before you went into that is, I was surprised most companies don't run effective ones. We were one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And once we got this pulsing down, I looked forward to the quarterly meetings. They were fun. I ended up loving my meetings and loving the people I worked with, because it was fun, like you said, to see the wins, to celebrate. It was our chance as visionaries and founders to reward our team too. We had a fun time where we got to, hey, we did great this quarter. We want to reward you all because it was all everybody here's. So I don't know, for you, it was an insightful aha moment when we started really getting the pulsing on the quarterly going.
Yeah, I mean, you think of quarterly meetings as checkpoints, like I said,
Yeah.
where you're sharpening your strategy. But as you mentioned, you get to also stack up your successes, and every quarter counts as, something part of the journey that you get to reflect back on. And
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, hey, we're coming to the end, Dan, as usual. We want to do a checkout. We went over, I always just recap. We talked about meetings. It's hard. We do this in a whole day, one day. That we come in and do a 1 day, 30 day, 90 day, 60. So in the first 1 day, we're really going over this structure, and this is what we do with our clients. So hopefully we gave you some really good nuggets here. If you want to get a hold of either of us, just reach out to us, DM us here. We're both on LinkedIn or Facebook. Just get a hold of us, and we'd love to set up a quick meeting with you. We'll do it over Zoom, or we'll come to you, and we'd love to sit down and see what your team's doing and help you. Dan, what's one thing, as always, what's one gold nugget you want to leave with them concerning this topic?
yeah, think of your meetings as moments where you're writing your success story, one chapter at a time, one page at a time, maybe as weekly meetings, and one chapter at a time for quarterly meetings. And think of it about meetings as your chance for taking action, for moving closer to what you envision your company achieving.
Yeah. I would just echo the same. And my last thing I'd leave with you is don't start a process like this and think it's going to happen overnight. It took us a while to get this pulsing down. It took us a while to be effective in our meetings because we had to change our way of thinking. So it was really good. All right, guys, I'm Matthew. This is Daniel, and we're with Company Acceleration, and we're excited as we're getting movement here. You're going to be seeing consistent content for you. Go join our Facebook by following us. Follow us on LinkedIn. We have a page there. It's Company Acceleration. Follow that page. You'll get updates on upcoming things. And on also, if you just need anything, like I said previously, just reach out to us. All right, Dan, thanks for joining. We'll see you guys Tuesday or Friday, because those are the 2 days we'll be on here. Take
All right.
care.
See you.